Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be making our last minute Yule Log recipe for those of you that have left it this late, so let's get straight into it. Start by cracking your eggs into a bowl that's placed over some lightly simmering water, and I'm making enough for 2 sponges here, but I'll put the recipe for one down in the description below. Next up, add all of your sugar at once and begin to whisk with an electric whisk. This will take you a long time with a hand whisk. After a few minutes, lift up the bowl to release the excess steam and just keep whisking until you can do a figure of 8 that slowly sinks back in. Take off the heat and carry on whisking until you have a figure of 8 that sits firm on top. And now sieve your cocoa powder into your flour. Don't skip this step or you'll have lumps of cocoa powder in your finished sponge. And then sieve half of your cocoa and flour mixture over your whisked eggs and begin to fold in lightly. So to do this, you want to run your spatula around the outside of the bowl and keep folding the mixture on top of itself towards the centre. And when that's just about mixed in, you want to add your second half of your flour and cocoa powder mixture. And continue folding until it is just about mixed in. Don't go too far here or we'll lose all the aeration we've just put in. And you'll end up with a dense sponge. Once that's done, pour half of your mixture if you've made a double batch, or all of your mixture if you've made a single batch, onto a large lined baking sheet. And I'll spread that out into a rough rectangle shape. You don't need to make this perfect here, but try and make it an even thickness all the way through. And now we need to bake this until just cooked. If you overcook this, it won't roll and your sponge will crack. And here it is cooked, so we're just going to cover it with a bit of baking paper and leave to cool fully. In the meantime, we'll make the filling. So the filling we're using today is a chocolate buttercream, a really easy recipe that's absolutely amazing. But before we start that, we're going to put some cream on the heat, and that's for our ganache later. So for the buttercream, we're just going to add all the ingredients to a bowl, except for the milk, and just start with a wooden spoon mixing it together. And once it comes together, we can add our milk, and just gently beat together until no dry ingredients are left. Anyway, quickly to the ganache, we're just going to add our hot cream directly onto our chocolate. No need to stir or anything here, just leave it to one side for a little while whilst we finish our buttercream. So back to the buttercream now, we can get rid of the wooden spoon and start blending it together with our electric whisk and just keep whisking until it becomes pale in colour and light and fluffy like this. Now back to the ganache, just stir it together with the wooden spoon until all the cream is incorporated, and then whisk for about 10 minutes until it is a chocolate mousse consistency, and it should look something like this. Now place your buttercream and ganache into piping bags. Now back to the sponge we made earlier, take off the baking paper and we're going to trim this to a perfect rectangle shape. This will remove all the dry edges, making it nice and easy to roll. And then we'll flip it over and just carefully peel off the baking paper, making sure you don't tear any of the sponge. Now if you don't have piping bags available, you can just spread both your mixtures on, but it will look a lot more professional if you use piping bags. So now either spread or pipe your buttercream mixture onto the sponge, making sure it's as even as possible, and we're going to leave about a quarter of it with no buttercream on at all. This will be the bottom edge of our roulade once it's rolled. So now we'll just roll it up as tightly as we can, trying to keep a circular shape. Make sure to use the baking paper here to help you roll it, as if you try and roll the sponge, it will tear. Once you're at the end of the roll, just make sure that seam is dead center and press down very gently to seal. To serve this, I've just wrapped a chopping board up in some Christmas wrapping paper and we'll transfer the roulade onto that. Next, cut the tip off your piping bag with the whipped ganache in and begin piping lines evenly all the way down the length of your roulade. Again, you could just spread this on with a palette knife. And then we'll just pipe a little around each end to seal them up. And now that's fully covered, we're going to take a palette knife and just gently spread that all over. It doesn't have to be that neat here. As you can see, we're about to take a fork and just run that down. Just make sure each time you wipe the excess chocolate off, otherwise it will drag the rest of it along and not give you straight lines. And we'll just do that end effect by running a fork in a circular motion around each side. And lastly, we're just going to dust this heavily with some icing sugar. And that's about it, you're all done. This will keep in the fridge for about a week or on the side for 2 days. If you do put this in the fridge, make sure you take it out at least a couple of hours before serving to let all of the buttercream and ganache soften up. Anyway, that's it, we're finished. See you next week.